I woke up to nothing, no alarm, no notifications, no one waiting, just silence. At first I thought something was wrong. My phone lay face down beside me. No buzz, no red dots, no one reaching out. I sat up staring at the gray light filtering through the blinds. The air felt heavy, like the quiet had weight. It pressed down on my chest, not crushing, but tight enough to notice it, tight enough to feel real. I used to hate mornings like this. Used to panic when my calendar was empty, because silence to me meant I wasn't needed. And if I wasn't needed, did I matter? I reached for my phone, habit, scrolled through my messages, pretending I wasn't counting how many days had passed since her name last lit up the screen. It had been 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she said I need space. 3 weeks since my job told me they were restructuring. And now the silence was all I had left. Funny how no one prepares you for this. Not the heartbreak, not the unemployment, not the part where you wake up and realize there's no one to perform for anymore. I stood in the mirror and looked at the man I'd been avoiding, not because I hated him, but because I didn't recognize him. Tired eyes, slumped shoulders, a kind of hollow beneath the surface, like I'd been trying too hard for too long, and forgot what I was even trying before I turned away. Stillness can feel like drowning when you've built your identity on noise. It hit me while making coffee, how I'd filled every moment with something: music, podcasts, work dates, just enough noise to keep from hearing the thing I feared most. My own thoughts. That morning I decided not to turn anything on. No background music, no breaking news. Just let it be quiet. It was unbearable. The minutes stretched. My mind raced. Everything I'd been avoiding came rushing back. The mistakes, the regrets, the version of me I kept postponing becoming. I felt the pressure building, a panic swelling in my chest. No one was calling. No one needed me. I started pacing the kitchen like it would help me escape the stillness inside me. And then it happened. Not a heart attack, not a breakdown, just a moment. A crack in the noise I used to crave. I stopped pacing. I breathed. One inhale, one exhale, just to see if I could stay. I sat down on the floor, back against the fridge, knees pulled up like a kid hiding from a storm. But there was no storm, just silence, and something strange started to happen. It didn't kill me. It didn't destroy me. It revealed me. That's when the voice came, not hers, not my boss's, not even my inner critic. It was quieter than all of them. And it said, "You suffer not from being alone, but from never having faced yourself." I closed my eyes, let it sink in, and I stayed there for minutes, or maybe hours. I don't even know. All I remember is the sense of something shifting. The silence wasn't empty. It was honest. I wasn't being punished. I was being introduced to myself. They don't tell you this part, that the longer you distract yourself, the longer you delay the moment when you finally meet the person you really are, underneath the bombs, the roles, the relationships, the applause. And let me tell you, that first meeting, it's brutal. It strips away everything performative, everything safe. I started to see it for what it was. This silence wasn't my enemy. It was a door. A door most men are too afraid to walk through, but I was already on the other side. There was no going back. That afternoon, I didn't make plans, didn't post, didn't check my phone. Instead, I walked, no destination, no music in my ears, just the sound of my feet on pavement and the wind in my face. The world kept moving around me. Cars, people, conversations I wasn't a part of. And for once, I didn't feel left out. I felt still. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to catch up. I wasn't chasing anything. Not validation, not someone else's timeline. Not even closure, I just walked. And somewhere between block 3 and 4, I heard it again. That quiet voice, "This is solitude and you're still breathing." That stopped me because in my head, solitude was always a threat. The place you landed when you failed. The space you found yourself in when no one chose you. But this was different. This solitude wasn't punishment. It was permission. Permission to stop performing. Permission to listen. Permission to just exist. Not as a boyfriend, not as an employee, just as a man learning to sit with himself. And in that moment, I made a quiet promise. I wouldn't run from the silence anymore, because something told me The longer I stayed here, the more I began to remember the man I used to be and discover the one I was meant to become. The silence didn't break me, it sobered me. But as the days passed, something else started to surface. Something quieter, subtler, but just as destructive: approval. I didn't notice it at first. It was like background noise, always there, always shaping me. The way I replied to texts, the way I smiled in conversations I didn't care about, the way I checked my phone over and over again, waiting for someone, anyone, to validate that I still existed. Even in solitude, I wasn't really alone. I was still performing. I'd spent years curating my life like a highlight reel, hoping someone would watch long enough to believe it was real. And if I'm honest, I started to believe it too, until I didn't. That morning, I picked up my phone, stared at it for a full minute, and put it back down. No notifications, but this time, instead of disappointment, I felt a strange kind of freedom. I wasn't missing anything. I was just addicted to being seen. I started thinking about all the ways I'd shaped myself to fit in. How many times I'd laughed at things I didn't find funny. How many times I said yes just to avoid discomfort. How many masks I wore just to be liked. That's when it hit me. I wasn't addicted to connection. I was addicted to approval. And that's not the same thing. Approval is a performance, connection is a truth. One builds walls, the other tears them down. But I didn't know who I was without the mask. So I decided to find out. I opened a blank notebook I bought months ago and never used. First page, no prompts, no plan, just space. I wrote one sentence. Who am I when no one's watching? I stared at it. It looked back at me like a mirror. And for the first time in years, I didn't have an answer. The next few days were raw. Every time I picked up my phone, I caught myself. Not because I needed information, but because I was checking. Did she text? Did they comment? Did someone notice me? It was reflex muscle memory from a life built around applause. But I was done. Done being shaped by expectations I didn't choose. Done shrinking to fit in. So I started small. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I turned off notifications. I unfollowed people I didn't even like. I stopped posting things just to prove I was okay, because I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. And it wasn't just digital. In conversations, I said what I meant, even if it felt awkward. When someone asked how I was doing, I stopped saying I'm good out of habit. Sometimes I said I don't know yet. And that honesty, it felt dangerous, like walking into a room naked, but it also felt real. That's when the detox really began. The approval detox. No one tells you how brutal it is, how lonely it feels at first. When you stop performing, people don't know what to do with you. Some drift away. Others look confused. They like the version of you that was easy to applaud, not the one that stood in silence, unafraid of rejection. One night I almost broke. I'd been feeling isolated, like the world was moving on without me. I opened the dating app I deleted, reinstalled it, stared at the login screen, and then paused. And I asked myself, am I doing this because I want connection or because I want to be liked? The answer was obvious, so I closed the app, deleted it again, this time for good. That night I sat with the discomfort, let it ache, let it stretch. And somewhere in that silence, something new appeared. Not loud, not urgent, just solid. A voice I hadn't heard in years, my own. It didn't need to be validated. It didn't ask for applause. It just existed, firm, steady. And in that moment, I knew this is what it means to reclaim yourself. Not in some dramatic, Instagram-worthy way, but quietly, completely. I stopped saying yes when I meant no. Stopped laughing when it wasn't funny. Stopped giving energy to people who only remembered me when they needed something. And the craziest part? People started to notice, not because I was louder, but because I was clearer. There was a weight in my presence now. Not arrogance, not detachment, just peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to explain itself. That's the paradox no one tells you. The less you try to be seen, the more visible you become, because people are drawn to real, not curated, not performed, but real. And when you carry that kind of energy, you don't chase attention, you carry it. That's when I realized approval was never love. It was control, and I was finally free. I wasn't prepared for what came next. I thought silence would get easier. That after the detox, after deleting the apps, letting go of the masks, and sitting with myself, things would settle. But it turns out, stillness doesn't stay quiet for long. It stirs things up, it burns. I accepted a friend's invite to a bar one night. Nothing wild, just a drink, maybe a few laughs, a chance to feel normal again. At first, it felt okay. Small talk. Laughter that didn't belong to me. Familiar rhythms I used to slip into like a well-worn coat, but halfway through the second drink, I felt it. The ache, not physical, not sharp, just a gnawing under the surface. I was surrounded by people, but I felt completely alone. I looked around, everyone was performing. Everyone wanted to be heard, seen, admired. And all I could think was, what are we running from? I left early, didn't say goodbye, just stepped out into the cold night and started walking. No destination, no playlist. Just me and the echo of everything I tried to bury. My feet carried me farther than I expected, through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Every storefront I passed, every face I didn't know, it all blurred together, and the noise in my head got louder. The regrets, the people I'd let down, the promises I'd broken to myself. I kept walking because standing still felt like inviting the whole weight of my past to come crashing down on me. But eventually I stopped. Right there under a flickering streetlight, I sat down on a bench and let it come. Everything, the guilt, the shame, the fear that maybe I wasn't just broken, I was never whole to begin with. That's when the breakdown happened. No audience, no dramatic music, just a grown man sitting in the dark, crying into the collar of his jacket, trying to remember who he was before he started pretending. The pain didn't explode, it leaked. Slow and steady, like a valve finally opened. After years of pressure, and I didn't fight it this time, I let it burn. Because here's what no one tells you. Stillness is not peaceful at first, it's a wildfire. It burns through illusions, through denial, through every carefully constructed version of yourself you built just to survive. The silence pulled back the curtain, and I saw myself, not the curated version, not the one I hoped people saw, but the one underneath. The one who failed, the one who feared, the one who never said what he meant, never asked for what he needed, never stayed long enough to figure out what he really wanted. That man, he was still in there, buried beneath years of noise and numbing. And in that moment, sitting alone with swollen eyes and shaking breath, I didn't hate him. I forgave him because he did the best he could with what he knew. But now I knew more, and I wasn't going to run anymore. I walked home slowly, didn't rush to fill the void, didn't try to bounce back. I just breathed. Each step grounded me. Each breath felt like a small reclaiming. When I got home, I didn't reach for my phone, didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the dark for a moment and whispered, "You stayed." And that was enough, because in that single act, choosing not to run, choosing to sit in the fire instead of fleeing, I earned something. Not status, not validation, command, inner command. The kind of power you don't show off, the kind you feel in your bones, the kind that doesn't beg to be respected because it no longer needs the world's permission. I started seeing the storm differently, not as something to fear, but something to embrace, because the fire wasn't destroying me. It was refining me, burning away the things I never needed, burning off the stories I no longer believed, burning down the expectations that were never mine to carry. And from that fire, something new emerged. Not confidence, not arrogance. Clarity, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't need to defend itself, just a quiet knowing that I was still here, still breathing, still becoming. They say growth starts in the gym, in books, in seminars. But for me, it started in stillness, in surrender, in a moment on a cold bench where I stopped running and faced the man I'd been hiding from. And in that raw, trembling stillness, I found something I didn't expect: strength. Not loud, not sharp, just steady. The kind of strength that waits, that listens, that walks into the fire and doesn't flinch. That's when I realized you don't need to escape the fire, you need to endure it because it's burning off what isn't you. There's something strangely powerful about waking up and not needing to check your phone. That morning, I didn't reach for it. No rush, no urgency, no voices waiting to tell me who I should be or what I was missing. Just stillness and space, and in that space I saw something I hadn't noticed before: how cluttered my life had become. Not just my apartment, not just my inbox, but my identity. I was carrying people, expectations, habits, objects, things that no longer served me, but still demanded space, still drained my energy, and I realized it was time to let go. So I started with something simple: the junk drawer in my kitchen, old receipts, dead batteries, pens that hadn't worked in years. I threw them out one by one, not because it changed my life, but because it reminded me I had a choice to clear space, a choice to stop holding on to things I no longer needed. It felt good, so I kept going. Books I never read, clothes I hadn't worn in seasons, half-used notebooks filled with lists and goals that belonged to a man I no longer was. I gave them away, donated, tossed, freed up the physical weight, and slowly the emotional weight followed. But the harder part wasn't the stuff, it was the people. There were names in my contacts I hadn't spoken to in years, connections that only existed out of politeness, friendships that weren't friendships, just echoes of who I used to be. Some conversations were overdue, others were silent goodbyes. I stopped responding to people who only called when they needed something. I stopped explaining myself to those who never listened. I stopped bending to fit into rooms I had already outgrown. And it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cruel, it was honest. For the first time, I was choosing my peace over their comfort. I reorganized my apartment the same way I was reorganizing my mind, with intention. Every item, every hour, every conversation had to earn its place, and that shift, it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. My morning started earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I ran again, not to escape, but to reconnect. I started sketching badly and perfectly, just to express something without editing it. I replaced scrolling with journaling, not to impress anyone, just to stay grounded. And for the first time in years, my routines weren't obligations. They were reflections of who I was becoming, of what I valued, of how I chose to live. There's a subtle power in honoring your time, in treating it like currency, in deciding every day who and what is worth spending it on. And with that came a new kind of boundary, one that didn't require confrontation or explanation. I simply became unavailable for anything that didn't align with where I was going. Not out of anger, but out of alignment. That's when it really started to show. People noticed the difference, not in my words, but in my presence. I wasn't trying to be heard anymore. I was just clear. And clarity speaks louder than noise. I remember getting a text from someone I used to bend over backward for. She wanted to catch up, grab coffee, no pressure, she said. And maybe 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything, tried to be interesting, charming, whatever version of me she once liked. But now I looked at the message and didn't feel the need to answer. Not because I was bitter, but because I was full. My attention wasn't available for performance anymore. It was reserved for peace, for presence. That's what people don't understand when you start cutting ties. It's not about being cold, it's about being clean. You remove what's not true, you clear what no longer fits, and what's left is you. Not the edited you, not the adaptable, ever agreeable version, just you, and that's more than enough. I began filling my space with things that reflected that clarity. Books that challenged me, art that made me feel silence, that didn't scare me. I didn't need stimulation anymore. I needed alignment, and it showed. Even in conversations, my voice changed, not louder, but firmer, not sharper, but more sure. I didn't chase connection. I filtered it. If someone didn't match the piece I was building, I let them go. Not with resentment, but with respect, because not everyone is meant to walk with you into your next chapter. Some people were only there for the lesson, and once you've learned it, holding on becomes a form of self-sabotage. I stopped sabotaging. And in doing so, I started building slowly, intentionally, a life I didn't need a break from, a space that didn't feel like performance, an identity that didn't shift depending on who entered the room. And the more I cleared, the more room I had for discipline, for focus, for the man I was becoming. They say minimalism is about having less, but for me, it was about becoming more. Because now when I wake up, I don't wonder who needs me. I ask myself a different question. What do I need to stay true to the man I'm building? And the answer always starts with space. There's a difference between quiet and stillness. Quiet is just the absence of noise. Stillness is a presence, a weight like something sacred is filling the room. I didn't understand that until I got out of the city. I rented a cabin 2 hours upstate. No Wi-Fi, no service, just a wood stove, some worn-out furniture, and a deck that overlooked a frozen lake. I brought a journal, a few books, but mostly I brought myself. And honestly, I wasn't sure if that would be enough. The first day was hard. I kept reaching for my phone out of habit, even though there was no signal. The muscle memory ran deep. The silence felt loud. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind, every heartbeat that wasn't muffled by distraction. But I stayed, I made tea, sat on the porch, watched the trees sway like they had nothing to prove. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped trying to fill the space. That night, I lit a fire, not because I needed the heat, but because I wanted to watch something burn. I sat there for hours, no music, no scrolling, no performance, just the sound of logs cracking and the steady rise and fall of my breath. That's when I wrote the letter, but to anyone else, to me, to the man I used to be. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what I was going to say, but the words came like water breaking through a dam. I wrote about the boy who thought love had to be earned, about the man who chased validation instead of truth, about the years I spent building a life that looked good even when it didn't feel good, and I didn't judge him. I thanked him because even though he was lost, he kept going. Even when he wasn't whole, he still showed up. He got me here to this cabin, to this stillness, to this fear. And then as I signed the letter, something shifted. I looked up. Out the cabin window across the lake, I saw it. A phrase carved into the old wooden frame above the fireplace. It was faint, like it had been there for years, but I could still make it out. He who walks alone knows the way. It stopped me cold. I'd read those words before, months ago in a blog post I found late one night during my lowest point. The same blog that helped me take my first steps into solitude, the one I never forgot but could never find again. And now here it was, etched into wood, waiting for me. It felt like more than a coincidence. It felt like a message, like a hand on my shoulder saying, "You're not the first, you're not alone." And in that moment, I realized stillness isn't where you lose yourself. It's where you return to the core, to the center, to the place beneath all the noise. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, stepped outside barefoot onto the frosted porch, and breathed in the cold like it was medicine. I didn't feel broken, didn't feel lost. I felt anchored, like something had clicked into place, and that's when I knew. This wasn't isolation. It was integration. I wasn't hiding from the world. I was meeting myself in it fully. After breakfast, I took the letter I'd written, folded it carefully, and placed it under the floorboard near the fire where someone else might find it years from now. Maybe a man like me, maybe a man like you. Someone who needs a reminder that stillness isn't absence, it's presence. And presence is power. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that moves slower, speaks less, but hits deeper. The kind that doesn't chase anything because it no longer needs anything outside itself to feel whole. I didn't leave the cabin changed. I left clear. And that clarity, it came not from doing more, but from finally doing nothing. Coming back to the city felt different this time. Same streets, same buildings. But something had shifted, not out there, but in me. I moved slower, spoke softer, listened more, and I noticed people responded differently. They leaned in when I talked. They paused when I entered a room, not because I demanded attention, but because I no longer needed it. That's the thing no one tells you. When you stop chasing the world, the world starts turning toward you. Not because you've changed the game, but because you've changed your posture. I wasn't looking to impress anymore. I wasn't performing. I was just being. And that presence, it drew people in. Job offers came in my inbox, unexpected. High-paying, tempting, but I didn't say yes immediately, not because I was unsure, but because I was no longer driven by urgency. I took my time, asked better questions. Not what's the salary, but does this align with who I'm becoming? One offer stood out, high prestige, lots of visibility, a role I would have jumped at a year ago, but this time I turned it down. I could tell the culture was all noise, status-driven, speed-obsessed, performative, and I wasn't that man anymore. It surprised even me how easy it was to walk away. No guilt, no second-guessing, just clarity. Because when you've built peace in your chest, you don't trade it for applause. Later that week, I stopped by a bookstore, picked up a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Not because I needed to study Stoicism, but because I wanted to honor the path that helped me find mine. At checkout, I noticed a younger guy behind me, early 20s, nervous energy, eyes darting around. He asked if the book was any good. I paused, looked at him, and said, "It won't fix you, but it'll help you remember who you already are." He nodded. Didn't say much. But something landed, I could see it. I saw myself in him all those years ago, grasping, searching, hoping someone had an answer. But here's what I've learned. You don't find the answer, you become it, not overnight, not with hacks or hustle, but by walking through fire, sitting in silence, letting go of what doesn't belong, and choosing every day to be a man who doesn't need to chase, because the man who knows who he is draws everything he needs. Not through force, but through frequency. Your energy doesn't beg, it declares. Later that night, I went home and opened my laptop, created a new blog, titled it, "Letters to the Man I Was Not," for followers, not for likes, but for anyone wandering the way I once did, scrolling through the noise, wondering why they still felt empty. I wrote about solitude, about discipline, about that night I cried on a park bench and realized I wasn't broken. I was just overdue for an awakening. The posts weren't polished, they weren't poetic, but they were real. And that's what I promise myself now. To live real, to speak real, to love real. Without seeking to be understood, because I finally understood myself, and in that understanding, I found something rare, a kind of stillness that moves mountains. A presence that speaks even when I'm silent. A clarity that walks into rooms and shifts the air without effort, without noise. So if you're listening to this, if you're in the middle of your own silence, your own solitude, your own stripping away, don't run from it. Let it shape you. Let it break the old version of you wide open. Because on the other side of that breaking is a man who doesn't chase, who doesn't plead to be seen, who doesn't perform for permission. There's a man who draws, and what he draws isn't attention, it's alignment, it's peace, it's power, not from control, but from knowing deep down he no longer needs to prove, because the longer he walks alone, the more dangerous he becomes.